Blog Talk Radio, the world's largest online radio network.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on World Footprints Radio. We're your hosts, Tonya and Ian Fitzpatrick, and we're broadcasting to you from our studio in the Metro Washington, D.C. area.
On today's show, environmentalist, activist, and lawyer Robert F. Kennedy Jr. joins us on the eve of the D.C. premiere of the IMAX docu-enviro adventure film, Grand Canyon Adventure, River at Risk, to talk about the state of the Colorado River and his drive to protect it and other waterways around the world. Then Rob Holmes and the Green Living Project are at the forefront of documenting cutting-edge global sustainability projects. We will catch up with Rob in D.C. as he shares some of Green Living Project's travel sustainability success stories. And finally, imagine taking your 18-month-old son, your wife, and your dog on a trip around the world in a VW bus at the height of the Vietnam War. Author Bill Raney did just that and now shares his memories in a new book, Letters to Zerky. As always, if you have a question or a comment, write to us at comments@worldfootprints.com.
And you know, we love connecting with you during the week in real time on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Stitcher, a mobile app that allows you to listen to us, World Footprints, on the go on any mobile device. So join us on all of those social networks and sign up for our newsletter and receive some travel deal information from our website at worldfootprints.com. When you hear Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talk about the sad state of the Colorado River, it is easy to understand why he cares so deeply about our nation's and our planet's waterways.
The Colorado River at this point never even reaches the sea. It peters out in the middle of the desert and just dries up. And it used to feed one of the richest estuaries on the planet, and the Sea of Cortez. There was tens of thousands of shorebirds and wading birds that used that estuary as part of their migration and part of their staging area. There were thousands of fish, hundreds of fish species that depended on the freshwater input of the Colorado estuary. There was the smallest dolphin on Earth that lived there that's now extinct because the Colorado rivers have disappeared. So it's really it's a tragedy of global proportions, and it's the result of bad leadership. It's the result of greed and short-sighted on policies, the state and national policies on water.
The Colorado River is the focus of the film you appear in, Grand Canyon Adventure, River at Risk. Talk to us about why you got involved with this film.
Well, for me, it was a no-brainer. It was a chance to go down the Colorado River. So, the Colorado River is one of the iconic rivers for people who love whitewater, and I've been doing whitewater paddling since I was a little kid. This was also a chance for me to go with my daughter, who was 18 years old, my daughter Kick, and that's important to me because my father took me on this river when I was 13. And Kick's been on many whitewater rivers. She's an accomplished kayaker and paddler, and she's been on whitewater with me all over the world since she was a little girl. But she'd never been on the Colorado, which is kind of it's the flagship of whitewater rivers. It's the gold standard. It's the river by which all other whitewater rivers are judged. And to be able to return to it with her after 30 years, essentially, was a real treat.
Mm-hmm. Now, your organization, Waterkeepers, was born out of your work preserving and protecting the Hudson River. Talk about the work that Waterkeepers is doing today.
Well, there's 200 waterkeepers. The movement got started on the Hudson River in 1966. It was started by a blue-collar coalition of commercial and recreational fishermen who mobilized to reclaim the river from its polluters. These were people who had, for the most part, they weren't affluent people. They had little expectation they'd ever see Yellowstone or Yosemite or the national parks. For them, the environment was their backyard. It was the bathing beaches, the swimming holes, the fishing holes of the river. Penn Central Railroad in 1966 began vomiting oil from a 4.5-foot pipe in the Croton-Harmon rail yard. The oil went up the river on the tides and blackened the beaches and made the shad taste of diesel. And the people in the town of Crotonville, which was one of the enclaves for the commercial fishery on the Hudson, came together in the American Legion Hall, about 300 people, to talk about how to reclaim their river. They had been to the government agencies that are supposed to protect Americans from pollution, and they got no help. They'd come to the conclusion that government was actually in cahoots with the polluters. And they talked about putting bombs in the pipes, of jamming mattresses up the pipes, of lighting the oil slick from the Penn Central pipe on fire, floating a raft of dynamite into the intake of the Indian Point power plant, which at that time was killing 1 million fish a day on its intake screens and taking food off their family tables. And then a man stood up whose name was Bob Boyle. He was the outdoor editor of Sports Illustrated magazine. There were 300 people in the American Legion Hall that night trying to figure out how to get their river back. And he had written an article about angling in the Hudson 2 years before, and in researching it, he had discovered an ancient navigational statute called the 1888 Rivers and Harbors Act that said it was illegal to pollute any waterway in the United States. You had to pay a big penalty to get if you got caught, but also there was a bounty provision that said that anybody who turned in the polluter got to keep half the fine. And he stood in front of this group that night and he said, you know, instead of breaking the law, let's start enforcing it. And they resolved that they were going to start a group. It was then called the Hudson River Fishermen's Association. It later became Riverkeeper. They were going to go out and track down and prosecute every polluter on the Hudson. And 18 months later, they collected the first bounty in United States history under this 19th century statute. They shut down the Penn Central pipe for good. Then they used that money to go after Ciba-Geigy and Tuck Tape and Standard Brands and American Cyanamid, the biggest corporations in America, Anaconda Wire and Cable, collecting hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines and bounties. They used the money to build a boat, and which they patrols the river, tracking down polluters. They hired lawyers. They hired a riverkeeper, a former commercial fisherman, in 1984 using bounty money. And then they restored the Hudson. Today, the Hudson's the richest water body in the North Atlantic. It produces more pounds of fish per acre, more biomass per gallon than any other waterway in the Atlantic north of the equator. And the miraculous resurrection of the Hudson has inspired the creation of around 200 riverkeepers, all waterkeepers all over the country. And now we have growth internationally. We have 17 in Australia. We have, I think, 29 in Latin America. We have 12 in Canada. We have 7 in Russia, 7 in China. We just got an application from Iraq today for a waterkeeper there. So we're the fastest growing water protection group in the world, and we have one on the Colorado as well. And it was great for me to be able to see the river again.
Your father and your uncles always spoke of legacy and left a tremendous legacy in terms of inspiring a generation to act and to leave something positive behind for their children. As we focus on the state of our environment, and this film puts a particular focus on the Colorado, talk to us about the importance of nature, the importance of this legacy in terms of shaping who we are and really showing what America really should stand for.
Well, we're not protecting our rivers and streams, our nature, so much for the sake of the fishes and the birds. We're safeguarding those things because they're the infrastructure of our community. And if we want to meet our obligation as a generation, as a nation, as a civilization, which is to create communities for our children that provide them with the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us, we've got to start by protecting our environmental infrastructure, the air we breathe, the water we drink, the wildlife, the fisheries, the public lands, the shared resource of our society, the commons or the commonwealth, those things that are not susceptible to private ownership, but by their nature are the possession of the entire community, the landscapes and rivers that connect us to our past, to our history, that provide context to our communities, and that are the source ultimately of our values and virtues and our character as a people. My father taught us that this was part of our natural heritage. This is our legacy. And from the beginning of our nation's history, our greatest political leaders and cultural leaders and philosophers and theologians were telling the American people that you don't have to be ashamed that you don't have the 1,500 years of culture that they have in Europe, because you have this relationship to the land, and particularly wilderness, which is the undiluted work of the Creator. And that's going to be the source of your values and virtues and character. And, you know, if you look through at every valid piece of classic American literature, whether it's Hawthorne or Melville or James Fenimore Cooper or Washington Irving or, you know, Emerson, Thoreau, you know, and on, the central unifying theme is this conviction that nature was the critical defining element of our culture. Our poets, Whitman, Frost, Emily Dickinson, Robert Service, our artists, the Hudson River School, Thomas Cole, Frederick Church, Samuel F.B. Morris, all of Bierstadt and Cropsey, all of them painted these stark landscapes, these indomitable landscapes, which, you know, were meant to portray the freshness and the energy of American democracy, as opposed to the stale, you know, worn-out, stuffy, monarchical governments of Europe. And Frederick Jackson Turner, who was our greatest American historian, said that in America, democracy came out of the wilderness. Without these great tracts of forests and fields and savannas, we wouldn't have evolved the political system that now defines us as a people.
Some of your great experiences have been, life experience have been shaped because of your adventures on rivers around America. The Snake River, the Colorado River obviously is featured in the film. Talk to us about the transformative impact your journeys have had with respect to some of the river experiences that you've had in shaping who you are today.
Well, you know, my father took us on all of the great whitewater rivers, or most of the great ones, when we were kids, and I've continued to do that. My brothers and I owned a whitewater company, primarily a kayaking company, for more than 10 years during our college days, and we did whitewater all over Canada. We did a lot of first descents on rivers like the Magpie, like the Great Whale, which is up in the Arctic, and all over Latin America, the Atrado in Colombia, the Caroni in Venezuela, the Apurimac in Peru, and, you know, all across our continent. And, you know, whitewaters, and that's something that I do with my kids today. I bring my children every year to Chile to do one of the great rivers in the world, the Futaleufú in Patagonia. And it's a wonderful way of experiencing wilderness, of struggling with wilderness without destroying it, you know, and of watching from a boat as the landscapes pass by, and getting a feel for the watersheds, not just the geology and the biology, which are defined by the watersheds and by the river systems, but also the history and culture of a nation, which, you know, are completely tied up in the river and defined by the river systems.
Well, last question, and I can't let you go before I ask you about your experience at the LSE. I also studied at the London School of Economics, and I had a wonderful time. What was that experience like for you?
Well, I enjoyed living in Europe for a year, although I have to say I didn't see sunshine much, and I need a lot of sunshine. So, but it was fun. I got to drive around Scotland and Ireland, and you know, and see parts of the world. You know, get a feel for Europe and England, and see parts of the world that I had not spent time in.
Well, thank you so much for everything you're doing, Robert Kennedy Jr. And thank you very much for joining us today on World Footprints.
Thanks for having me.
When we come back, we'll focus on global sustainability with Green Living Project's Rob Holmes next as World Footprints Radio continues.
Hi, my name is Emmeline. I'm from Korea. I love Footprints Radio. Good job!
Welcome back. With over 50 projects in 14 countries around the world, Green Living Project is showing us how sustainable tourism education, conservation, and volunteerism is changing communities and changing lives the world over. Rob Holmes, the founder and president of Green Living Project, sat down with us in Washington after the premiere of Global Sustainability, Central America to Maine, to talk about some of the success stories Green Living Project has been documenting for the world to see. Rob, welcome to World Footprints.
Thanks, guys. Great to be here.
Talk to us about the genesis behind Green Living Project. What was the motivation for it?
I've got a background in conservation, tourism, and storytelling, being a photographer for 20 years, and got to the point where I wanted to get more involved with the communities that I was getting exposed to around the world, but also make a broader impact and do deeper, richer storytelling. And the underlying message and theme for Green Living Project is sustainability. And one thing I always say is I like sustainability. It's an overused word, but I like it because it means different things to different people. And so ultimately, Green Living Project's mission is to educate, inspire, and entertain people on cutting-edge, unique, sustainability-related projects, both domestically and internationally.
Now, the international footprint of Green Living Project is pretty vast. You've gone from Africa to South America to Central America and North America. Talk to us about the geographic scope of where you're taking Green Living Project and some of the things that you're doing in those places.
Well, we started in Africa in 2008. Green Living Project started in 2007, just putting the idea together. Then in 2008, our first launch was in Africa. And we did a lot of work in Africa, primarily because I think there's a huge opportunity there. Africa doesn't get the attention it deserves, and it's also thought of as an exotic, more remote destination that a lot of Americans, in particular North Americans, don't travel to as much. And I saw there's a huge opportunity to make a difference, to call out a destination in a region. We shifted to South America, and then more recently to Central America, and then in our backyard, domestically in the U.S., The approach really has been to identify cutting-edge, unique stories in different parts of the world. A huge underlying part to Green Living Project is about the destinations, is about these countries. If it's Rwanda, if it's Namibia, if it's Mozambique, if it's Ecuador, Peru, or more locally, Mexico, Guatemala, Belize. So that the tourism aspect to Green Living Project is really important. Tourism is, we focus on 5 markets. Tourism being the most important, but we also look at wildlife conservation, education, community development, and food is an exciting area, with culinary tourism really growing, and I think an important or new exciting market for tourism.
Now, Rob, you, as you just discussed, you've been all over the world documenting sustainable development projects. How do you find these projects that you document or select them?
Well, Green Living Project has sort of a 3-tier approach to how we identify projects. First, we've got relationships with well-known organizations, if it's the UNDP, CARE, Rainforest Alliance, Earthwatch, that are doing great work around the world. They're well-known, they've got credibility and a great reputation, a lot of these organizations. A lot of organizations, though, that are smaller contact us, and so, again, we're not just working with big organizations. And I think lastly, the third part is we do our own research, because sometimes the best story, doesn't matter what you're talking about, if it's food, if it's wildlife, if it's tourism, some of the best stories are those tiny little NGO, small little organizations in a country you've never heard of or a project you've never heard of that is the best story. So at the end of the day, we need to make sure we're telling the best stories. Doesn't matter where it is, what countries or regions we're spotlighting, but ultimately, our goal is to showcase a diverse array of different projects where people are going to walk away. One reason why we're doing shorts meaning 4 to 6 minute videos, is because we believe if we come out with 10 different projects on 10 different stories in 3 countries, we're going to have a broader impact on the distribution side versus one documentary on one topic. Because we can take those 10, not just showcase them in the 175 events that we do nationwide, but also through the internet, through television. We have outside televisions now licensing our content. And so there's a lot new distribution outlets with this short story format. And where we're going into the future is really to continue this path on identifying cutting-edge, great stories where people are going to learn things. The bar is rising. If you look at tourism and all the great things, it's not just sustainability now. It's responsible tourism. It's sustainable tourism. It's getting deeper. It's geotourism. I mean, there's so many new words being created. But at the end of the day, we stand behind telling great stories, and we're looking at going back to Africa, also going to Asia. There are a lot of great stories in Europe that we're uncovering, and also in our backyard in the U.S. and Canada. So it's about expanding the reach and uncovering new destinations, exciting travel destinations, but ultimately we rest our laurels on great stories.
And where can these shorts be seen? I mean, you mentioned a lot of the distribution channels, but for example, in the D.C. market, is there a cable channel that runs the shorts, or are they mostly seen on the internet, or what? Where can people find you?
The distribution strategy for Green Living Project is really sort of 3 tiers. The first is we have a mobile team that goes around the country showcasing these projects at schools, retail stores, festivals nationwide. We'll be doing over 175 events next year alone around the country. So that's one way. We have these larger urban premieres, the DC premiere being a great example, but we also go to San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles, New York, Boston. So we do about 10 premieres a year, 1 per month essentially. And then thirdly is just what you say on the television side, we're slowly going into television. I think my original vision was to build our business, build our audience, build our reputation, get a following before going into television. I feel that too many people just rush into television with their demo on a DVD and say, this is what I want to do. Well, we want to say, this is what we've done. This is what we're doing and will continue to doing. So television is a new outlet, but it's one leg of our distribution. But right now in the DC market, if you have outside television on your local cable channel, you can see 12 of our projects will be on outside television this fall. And starting next year, we're now starting to talk to television and cable outlets now, because we have over 60 projects now across 17 countries. So we've got a lot of diversity, a lot of depth, and so ultimately people are starting to come to us, which is what we wanted. We wanted people to come to us, say, hey, we've heard about your reputation, we've heard about the work you're doing. Can we use some of these in our schools, at festivals, at trade shows, as an educational vehicle, if it's tourism, wildlife, education. So it's great to see people seeing the value of shorts, the value of storytelling, and ultimately the value of sustainable principles.
One of the projects that we learned about was Planting Empowerment, a very unique project in Panama that talks about sustainable forestry as well as community development in terms of how you're using that organization to really empower the locals there to really develop an industry that really speaks to some of your principles that you are helping to promote through Green Living Project. Talk to us about that project and how that's really representing some of the better things that Green Living is really taking to the rest of the world out here in terms of your mission and your educational focus.
What I like about Planting Empowerment is it's a simple story, and sometimes the most popular stories that we tell are the simplest. It's simple in the sense that you got some key issues here. You have deforestation, which we've all heard about. Panama has the largest rainforest in the Western Hemisphere outside of the Amazon, something that a lot of people don't know. So there's an opportunity when you look at agroforestry, sustainable forestry, which is the message of Planting Empowerment. There's a huge opportunity because they still have intact a beautiful rainforest. It also brings in the community aspect. Panama is a unique country. About 50% of the country is still composed of indigenous communities. And so you have that local heritage, the local culture, and so they're helping these local communities, not just with a new sustainable income resource. I mean, Planting Empowerment is focused on a polyculture agriculture market, meaning a diverse set of different species, planting trees, if it's mahogany, teak, and other rare and endangered hardwoods, in an actual rainforest setting, in the natural environment. It's going away from the traditional monoculture, which is just planting rows and rows and rows of trees. The trees in a natural forest grow better. It's like shade-grown coffee. And so this is a new concept in this region of Panama that they're working on. It's challenging. It needs to provide a regular, renewable income resource for the local people, or they're going to go back to what they were doing, slash and burn. But ultimately, it's sustainable, it's long-term, it's providing steady income, and it's a better income. The trees and the environment flourish. And so I like it personally. I like planning empowerment because it embraces cultural issues, environmental issues, and then economic issues. Ultimately, whatever people are doing in the sustainability world, it's got to make money, and it's got to ultimately improve their life, their standard of living, because the U.S., we take for granted that a lot of people living around the world are living day in, day out, and that next paycheck is what they're living by. And so they tell a great story. It's a simple but wonderful story on these important issues. And I really applaud the work that they're doing in Panama, and it was great for us to showcase them.
Now, one of the stories that you were able to share was really about urban sustainable tourism and the focus of Rainforest Alliance in Granada, Nicaragua. Now, there are a different set of challenges there, obviously, in the urban environment versus the countryside. Talk to us about some of the opportunities, particularly in the urban sustainability area, that people may not necessarily think of as opportunities for growing urban tourism.
Well, of all the different aspects of tourism that we focus on, if it's sustainable tourism, voluntourism, urban sustainable tourism tends to be very popular. Why? I think studies show that 80% of Americans live within a 2-hour radius of a major urban center. People can relate. People in North America especially can relate to urban projects. The work that Rainforest Alliance is doing in urban sustainable tourism is really important. Nicaragua is an up-and-coming country. It doesn't have the tourism infrastructure that a Costa Rica does, and in a way, that's an exciting opportunity. They're able to come in and lay the foundation for sustainable tourism being the baseline, not mass tourism. Costa Rica has experienced definitely a lot of mass tourism. Now they're trying to change it to sustainable tourism. So it's an opportunity for Nicaragua, for supporting the work that Rainforest Alliance is doing, and ultimately we can relate to these issues in an urban setting. And there are a lot of urban issues. If you look at water issues, cultural issues, waste, and these are issues that we can all relate to in Washington, D.C., in New York City, and around North America. So they bring up a lot of issues that we can relate to, and it's just a compelling story.
Rob, one of the projects we saw tonight talked about some of the indigenous cultures that the projects are working with, and really some of the challenges in trying to shift the paradigm of some of the indigenous people to help them towards sustainability. Can you talk a little bit about those challenges and some success stories?
Green Living Project really focuses on tourism, but a major part of sustainable tourism is the incorporation of the local communities, is supporting the indigenous communities, making them part of the solution. We just documented 6 sustainable tourism projects in Mexico, and these projects are going to be showcased at the UN Climate Change Conference at the end of November in partnership with Mexico Tourism, and the underlying theme there was the Mayan communities in Mexico, and they are such an integral part of the organizations that we spotlighted in Mexico. In Panama, with Planning Empowerment, they're doing the same thing in collaborating and working with indigenous communities. Planning Empowerment is doing similar work in sustainable tourism by connecting these indigenous communities to the final solution. They have to be part of the equation. These indigenous communities, Panama, approximately 50% of Panama is made up of indigenous Panamanians. And in order for the country to move towards sustainability, they have to be part of the dialogue. And ultimately, again, that goes to our work. Sustainability is about long-term sustainability issues. The community has to be part of that solution. If you're going to protect the environment, you're going to help the economy. They are the economy, these indigenous communities. They are the lifeline of the Darien Gap region. It's composed of indigenous communities. So if you're going to be successful in whatever you're doing, in this case, planning empowerment with agroforestry, sustainable agroforestry, the indigenous communities have to be part of the solution. And so, as for Green Living Project, tying in a community aspect is our lifeline. It has to be, because any model of sustainable tourism that you look at, the community is always a part of it. Triple bottom line issues, it's also always culture and community tied in. And we want to embrace that, because ultimately one of the final points I made tonight was support the local community. You have to. If you're just going on a mass tourism trip where you're going through a tour operator or a company, make sure that those dollars, some of your trip is going to the local community. And just by asking questions, getting involved, asking, also, try supporting more sustainable tourism, because by talking to the tour operators, talking to the local companies, the local hotels, practice sustainable tourism, talk to the local hotels, talk to the local tour operators, and see, hey, is a percentage of the money that I put toward your trip or your hotel, is it going to local people? Are you hiring local staff? Ask questions. The best thing that people can do, tourists can do as they travel around the world, all of us can do, is ask questions. Get involved with the organizations that you visit or you want to get involved with.
Rob, one of the unique things about what you've done is that you've taken your passion and your background to really bring a focus here to really transform your life. And I like the fact that you majored in wildlife management as an undergrad, and you're using your MBA here to really bring ingenuity to solving some really tough problems. How has this journey been for you, this experience through Green Living Project, and really bringing together and coalescing all of these things that make up who you are today, and what I think is really bringing greatly needed focus, ingenuity to some really tough problems and problem solving around the world?
Well, are you asking how have things been going for me or my wife? This journey for Green Living Project, it is a passion play. I mean, I'm living my dream in wanting to combine the areas that I'm most passionate about. If it's international travel, if it's conservation, sustainability, whatever you want to call it, if it's business. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and then ultimately tourism. I know, and the way I look at all of this is sort of the glass is half full type approach. There's a lot of opportunity out there. When I go to a hotel and see that they're not recycling or seeing that they're not being as green as they can, I actually see that as an opportunity. There's still growth out there. People think that sustainable tourism is done. Like, oh yeah, it's so old. Like, no way. We have barely scratched the surface. And that's where I see all of these challenges as opportunities to make a difference. And for Green Living Project, ultimately for me, it's about educating people, it's about inspiring people on these great stories that are out there, that we can make a difference, that all of us can make a difference in the work we do, the way we travel, the simple things. It's about bringing out great stories locally and globally. We're all going to travel. You can't, and development's going to happen. And that's, I'm sort of I'm a conservationist, but I also have a business hat on. I'm not a radical. I'm not going to go in and say, don't do this. I'm going to say, do this, but do it in a more sustainable, environmentally sensitive, culturally sensitive way. And I think that's ultimately my mantra in our approach, is that embrace these great stories, let them rise above and get the attention that they deserve. And ultimately for us, it's just exposing people to these success stories and exciting new destinations that people haven't heard of, and ultimately great organizations that they should support in indigenous communities.
Rob, talk to us about the future of Green Living Project. We know that you're going to be doing more work in North America, particularly New Mexico. Talk to us about what's next.
What's next for Green Living Project is obviously to continue the success we've had in documenting projects in Africa and Latin America, but the domestic work is really exciting. We're going to be in December in New Mexico. Next year we're already looking at projects in Idaho, Oregon, Vermont, Maryland. And there's a lot of different things going on, around the country, and we want to embrace that and give people that local and global perspective. On the international front, we're looking at projects in Europe. We're looking at projects in Asia now. Asia is a huge market. Looking at projects in China and India. So there's a lot of great stories. At the end of the day, we're going to go where the best stories are. And obviously we want to bring in the tourism aspect and spotlighting unique and exciting destinations, if it's Ghana or Angola or these up-and-coming travel destinations. But where Green Living Project is going is just to continue that momentum on embracing sustainable issues, if it's education, tourism, food, and really, continue that momentum of showcasing and promoting great stories.
Rob, if people want to follow Green Living Project, where can they go?
Well, I think there's a couple ways. Obviously, our website, greenlivingproject.com, we showcase all of the projects we've documented to date. That's obviously the first great resource. Secondly, our mobile team is going around the country, and I would really encourage people that are in the education field, have our mobile tour come to your neck of the woods. And I really encourage that. We have a free education program that's been very well received in over 100 schools nationwide. So the mobile tour is a great outlet. It's grassroots, it's flexible, and it's just been very successful in schools. These larger premieres are going nationwide. So obviously our website is a great resource, and our page on our Facebook page and Twitter page are obviously great outlets too, just to keep up to date. And television's going to be an exciting market for us. We're just now getting into it. The time is right. We've got our scale and where we've wanted to grow this, and so television is a logical market. It reaches a lot of people, and there are a lot of great opportunities in continuing to spread the word on these sustainable tourism and sustainability issues.
Rob Holmes, founder and president of Green Living Project, we thank you for being with us today on World Footprints.
Well, it's great to talk to you guys, and thanks again for the opportunity.
Sadly, the chance to revisit these treasured memories were lost when Bill lost his family. But years later, Bill did relive his journeys, and he decided to share his memories in his new book, Letters to Zerky. Bill, welcome to World Footprints.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, Letters to Zerky is one of the most beautiful expressions of love I've ever read. Talk to us about your reasons for publishing this book now, more than 40 years after your travels.
Yes, it was written a long time ago, but published very recently. You see, the letters were not with the intention or envisionment of it ever becoming a book. They were actual letters that were written to my son, Zerky, who was 10 months old at the time we began this adventure. This trip ended up going around the world. And he was a baby, and my wife and I realized that he would never remember any of this. And because for us it was pretty much the trip of a lifetime, we'd be talking about it in front of him, as the years went by. And we recognized that he wouldn't remember it, and someday he would be curious about it all, because after all, he'd been on it. So I got the bright idea of writing him a series of letters. And almost every night, after the day was done and we had the dishes done, I'd sit down in the Volkswagen bus in the rear seat and pull out the little table that it had. And I'd write him a letter, most frequently, what had happened that day. Although I didn't do it every day, and I ended up combining some of the letters, and so it isn't day by day. But they were to give to him when he became old enough to read or to become curious about that whole trip. And then when we got into the Middle East, there was so much going on, so many things that I couldn't even remember them all and incorporate them all into the letters, because the whole adventure and the travel got very rich. So my wife started keeping a diary, and that was going to be part of it. And then as we went along, we took a lot of photographs, pictures of Zerky in front of the Eiffel Tower, and Zerky at Dachau, and Zerky in the mountains, and Zerky in Kathmandu, and Zerky in all these places. And we never gave them to him, because when we got back over a year later, I moved down to Santa Cruz. I had a business opportunity to start a motion picture theater down there. And opening 1 month after opening day for the theater, Joanne died of a cerebral aneurysm in the night. Mm-hmm. And then about a year after that, Zerky got run over by a truck. Mm-hmm. So suddenly, all these letters were irrelevant, and put all that stuff away. And I didn't think about it for many years. Unfortunately, I didn't throw it away or burn it, which I might have. Mm-hmm. Mm. And many years later, I came across them and started looking at them, and I read them over, and I realized a lot of them were about the Middle East, about Afghanistan and Pakistan. Pakistan and Iran and all these places that are in the news these days. Thinking, maybe they book, and so they are.
You're traveling right now in the Zerky Mobile. Talk to us about your travels right now, and tell us about the name Zerky and its origins.
His name is Eric Raney, X, and my name was Bill. And all my life, in school and other places, people would say, "Hey, Bill," and half a dozen people or so, it seemed, would stand up. And I just got kind of tired of being, just plain Bill. And so I got the idea that if I ever had a kid, I'm going to give him a name, an unusual name, so there won't be a lot of them around. And somehow when that actually happened, I came up with the idea of Xerxes. King Xerxes of Persia. And so we gave him that. His first name was Eric. His middle name was Xerxes. But then it turned out that nobody could handle Xerxes. Nobody pronounced it, and they'd see it, and they would know what is this weird stuff. And so everybody started calling him Zerky, and we did too, because we thought that was kind of cool. And that's how Zerky came about. I guess it's what you call a nickname.
Well, it is a cute and memorable name, and looking at some of the photographs of him in the book, he looks like a Zerky. And the name fits him. Now, Bill, in addition to traveling through Europe and Southeast Asia, you also visited several countries that really aren't safe to explore today, countries like Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. What was it like experiencing the Middle East back when Americans were liked?
Well, it was difficult, not for the reasons that people today seem to think, because it was dangerous or because you run into hostile people. People were, I think I could say without exception, maybe there was one exception when the guy really tried to cheat me out at the gas pump, but that was relatively minor. And without exception, people were very generous. There was a lot of culture shock, because when you're in some far-off place where the people don't speak English, and the culture and the religion and everything is very different, it's hard to get around. I mean, we weren't on a guided tour or anything like that where we had translators or anything. We had to muddle our way through. And there were a lot of cultural misunderstandings that we bumped into. But the people, especially the Muslim people, were really accommodating. Later on, we figured out something I guess I'd heard back then, and that's that under Islam, it's a sin, or whatever they would call it. It's not a sin, I don't think, but to turn someone away from your door. If somebody's in help, you have a religious obligation to help them. And when you get these weird travelers stumbling through your country who don't know anything about it and don't know what you're doing, people would automatically help us as best they could. It's tough when they don't understand you. But the other thing that helped was Zerky. We had this beautiful little 1-year-old child, and he was blonde, by the way. And that made a big difference, because they don't have blondes in Asia. Everybody's black-haired. So he was kind of magical. And he also gave us an identity. If people would wonder who are these weird people who don't seem to know what they're doing, or maybe older Americans, because they could tell from it said USA on our license plate. And maybe they think, well, maybe they're CIA spies, or maybe they're, who knows who they are, but we don't like ugly Americans. But they'd see this beautiful little blonde kid, and they didn't think that. They thought, oh, I know who these people are. They're parents, just like us, and they love their child like we love our child. And suddenly they'd bring their kids out to play with this cute little kid, and we'd get invited into their houses, and all kinds of things. I mean, it made all the difference in the world having a child with us.
Mm-hmm.
There was never a downside to that. It was only an upside.
Now, Bill, you end all of your letters with "Love, Dad," but in your letter from Tehran, you wrote to Zerky, "So when you grow up, Zerky, please try to be thoughtful before passing judgment on people from foreign countries whose histories and cultures you don't understand. And when you go traveling on your own someday, please try to remember that you are often the beneficiary of your government's own foreign policies. Someday, too, you will have dirt on your hands. With love, your pissed-off dad." What was going on behind that letter to him?
Well, behind it all, I mean, there is a lot of culture shock associated with going to Iran. And the Shah, what was in power, the Shah of Iran at that point, but he was starting to teeter a little bit. They'd had a democratically elected government, that was the Mossadegh government, that Eisenhower, and with the help of the CIA, had overthrown the government and put the Shah into power. And the Shah was not popular with the people.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't like the Shah, and nobody liked the Shah except the U.S. State Department. And there was politically, it was a bit touchy. In spite of everything I have, there was a certain amount of resentment against America. But I'm going to stick with what I've said. When it came to us personally, as opposed to foreign policy and that sort of thing, people were still very welcoming. They were charmed by us. They didn't hold any of this against us personally, but we're very self-conscious. And I just thought when I was writing that some of it was written on when I was putting the letters together. I edited them and added a little bit. And it was written with that government, the toppling of the Mossadegh government in mind. And by the way, that's an awful lot of the troubles today, the wars in Iraq and in Afghanistan, trace themselves back to that event. That really was a little event, and the Iranian people still haven't forgiven us for it. And I don't mean us personally or individuals, but as a people.
Sure. Now, the one thing I love about this book, Letters to Zerky, it's both a loving tribute to your wife and son and a story of compassion and courage, but it also offers a wonderful example of global citizenship. And a prime example is the excerpt that Ian just read, where you tell Zerky to be thoughtful before passing judgment on people from foreign countries. Talk to us about the humanity that you actually experienced when you were traveling, and how things if things are different today, in your opinion, when you travel into other places and meet new people.
That is probably the ultimate benefit of traveling. As Americans, we don't. In the 60s, they stopped teaching geography in the school and the schools, the public schools, and most of the Americans are abysmally ignorant of the rest of the world. If they take a vacation, they're going to go to Hawaii. The more adventurous of them might go down to one of the beaches in Mexico. But that's about as far as most people get from home, and most of them stay within the continental United States. And the result is that there might be a little abstract information that they got from their school, or maybe they read something in the paper, but they're terribly ignorant of other people, and that a lot of people don't even understand that they don't speak English in most of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So when you travel, when you actually go there, you learn a lot about the people. You learn that their world is very different from yours. Their concerns are different. And you start looking, even when you get home, you start looking at what your government is doing and what you're reading in the papers and what people are saying about a country. For example, now people are saying, I'm in the Midwest right now, in North Dakota of all places. I'm running into all kinds of Muslims. And yesterday I had a haircut, And I got talking to the barber about all these Muslims, women running around in not purdah exactly, but in long shawls and that's covering their faces, some of them. And I'm thinking North Dakota was a hardcore Midwestern state. That's pretty strange. And how do the North Dakotans take this? And we talked for 45 minutes or so. I'm getting a haircut, and the answer is that a lot of them don't take it very well. There's resentment developing. Well, I understand that stuff because I've been in the Middle East, and I understand a little bit about the religion. And that's the wonderful thing about travel. The more places you go, the more cultures you experience. You learn that at its heart, people are pretty much the same. And particularly when it comes to kids are a real leveler because all societies have kids. They need them for survival. And it does make you a citizen of the world because when I got back, I started looking at things in the paper and on television, and it all had so much of it had a different cast to it. Oh, well, I understand why they did that, or why they said that. Of course. For example, it's because of the Shah, because they hated what the United States did when they installed him, and that kind of thing. It really broadens you out. It makes you think beyond your own borders, beyond your own specific little life. It makes you think on a much broader scale.
As we wrap up here, talk to us about what you hope people will experience from reading Letters to Zerky.
Well, one thing is that people will find the world, will start viewing it as a little less formidable. That if they've thought about the possibility of going someplace unusual, that they will say, well, here's a normal little family from America who took their dog and their son and just took off into the unknown and had a wonderful time and had a number of adventures, but no serious adverse experiences. And if they can do that, well, maybe I could go. Maybe I could take a trip to Morocco. Something a little bit off the beaten path. I'm hoping that it emboldens people a little and encourages them to think internationally and to take some of their hard-earned American currency and spend it in a foreign country, which is good for everybody's balance of payments, or at least other countries, and look at the real world close firsthand. I think that's it. I think Americans get pretty darn paranoid over this sort of stuff. I give these book talks, and they say, "Oh, isn't it dangerous? And isn't that, how could you do that?" And, "Oh, you mean he took a woman into the Middle East? Oh my God!" I mean, it's all false. It's all in people's heads. So much of it is wrong. So I hope it'll embolden readers.
Bill Raney, author of the memoirs Letters to Zerky, we thank you for being with us today on World Footprints Radio.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We hope you enjoyed our show today. We always look forward to spending quality time with you and certainly to connecting with you during the week on our social networks and other platforms like Stitcher. So follow us on those and sign up for our newsletter and check out our travel deals from worldfootprints.com. We're Tonya and Ian Fitzpatrick, and we'll see you on the air again next week, same time, same frequency. And until then, we wish you blue skies and purposeful travel that leaves positive footprints one step at a time.
Hi, guys. Blog Talk Radio, where millions of hosts and listeners gather.